Welcome to the Potential High podcast, where we glow up your learning. I'm your host, Allison Russo. Thank you so much for tuning in to the very first episode of Potential High. I am really excited to be taking this next step on my learning journey, where I get to share the things that I'm learning from a teaching perspective and help you apply that to your own goals. Today, we're going to start off strong by talking about learner variability, which is a snazzy way of saying we all approach learning in our own unique way. This basically is in stark contrast to common misconceptions like being right or left brained or being an auditory or visual learner. It's not about a learning style that is scientifically inaccurate. It is about maximizing your connections that fire within your nervous system. So let's dive in. Let's figure out what learner variability looks like. And we're going to start right there in the nervous system, which begins to develop in utero and then is rapidly growing in the first couple of years of life. So a baby is firing like a million neural connections every second. It is just rapid fire. The world is new to them and they are just making all of these new connections. This obviously is not consistent throughout the lifespan, but our brain and our nervous system is malleable, and we can continue to create new connections, form new pathways our entire lives. So really quick development as a baby, and this is laying the map of our nervous system. So just like every city, every town has its own unique landscape of roads and alleys and parks and its own map, each person has their own unique map to their nervous system. And there's going to be variability that's based on genetics and those early experiences and the early environment that you're in. That can include like your nutrition, your caretakers, the climate of where you live. All these different factors are at play. And then this is shaping our nervous system through the sensory input that we gather, the information that we gather through our senses. And we have 8 different senses. We're familiar with the commonly known sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. And then we also have a vestibular sense, which is what keeps us balanced and kind of tells us that we're upright, sort of like where our head is. Then we have proprioception, which is like where our body is in space and how to coordinate that. So if I want to pick something up, I know how far to reach. I know how tightly to grasp. That's our proprioception. And then we have interoception, which is internal sensations within the body. So knowing that you're hungry or that you need to go to the bathroom, feeling like your heart is racing, the things that allow you to kind of discern what emotions you're experiencing, that's your interoception. And when it comes to the variability of these, I think of it as like every sense having a door. And, you know, a door could be boarded up tight, shut, or it can open to varying degrees to the point where it's completely wide open. And this can vary between people. So like a blind person is going to have their visual door shut. They're not receiving any visual information. Or, you know, it could be like someone might have a sensitivity to where the door is actually wide open all the time, to the point where it's like uncomfortable, like, maybe touch, they can't even stand the feeling of clothing on their skin. It could be developmental. So babies are going to have an auditory door that's more open than even children that are like 5 or 6, because infants they can hear a wider range of pitches and sounds. It's partly why babies can learn languages just through repeated exposure, whereas, as you get older, learning languages becomes more difficult, and part of that is the openness of that auditory door and this sensory information that you can gain through your auditory system. There can be like everyday factors. So you might have more receptivity in the morning. You're a little more alert and rested, and less at night when you're more tired. Could be like other conditional things like an illness. So after COVID-19, maybe their olfactory sense was impacted and they couldn't really smell. And then there can also be like conditioned factors. So like the difference between, say, a man walking alone at night might be the same for him as he would be any other time, whereas like a woman walking alone at night might have her senses like a little more heightened and the doors are a little bit wider open. So we have these 8 doors, and each person is going to have them closed, open, slightly open, cracked open to different degrees, and it can vary within even ourselves from day to day, moment to moment. And through these doors, we're receiving 11 million bits of information per second. So remember the baby who was firing 1 million connections a second. That still is only a fraction of all the information. And us as adults, we are not firing at the rate of a baby. So this is just way more information than we can actually process and that we can consciously process. And so the brain-body system has this really nifty setup called the reticular activating system, and they're sort of like the doorman. So the information is coming in through those doors, but the RAS, the reticular activating system, is going to decide who gets to the like VIP section, who's going to come into conscious awareness, because there's so many people coming in, there's not enough room in the VIP. There's so much information coming in, we can't pay attention to all of it all the time, which is just not possible. And so, like, if you've ever gone on vacation, say, and you've rented a car and you picked out like the yellow Jeep and you're like, this is the coolest car. This is so awesome. Like, I've never even seen a yellow Jeep. This is so fun. And you're going around and then you start to see yellow Jeeps everywhere. And you're like, what the heck? How is there suddenly yellow Jeeps everywhere? Well, it's not that they didn't exist before. It's just that you didn't notice them. Along with having those systems that are gonna, pop in that sensory information into our field of awareness, we also have what's called meta-cognition, or our ability to think about our own thinking. And we can then manipulate what is brought to our attention by harnessing our own focus. This is then going to get into our affect and our goal orientation, which are a few other areas where we can have a lot of variability person to person and just within our own experience. And affect is essentially the set of beliefs that we hold about the experience we're having. So if you believe you're an auditory learner, you might skip reading an article because you feel like you don't learn well that way. But perhaps in the article there was an analogy using basketball that would have really clicked for you because you understand basketball already. And so it would have made those connections easier for you. But because you have an affect and a belief telling you that's not how you learn, then you weren't able to do it. And then this then ties back into the reticular activating system in that, the car was never relevant to you before, so you didn't notice them. But once you associated the car with yourself, then it became worth noticing. So your affect changed, and it changed your perception, and it changed the sensory information that you were registering. So they went from being unimportant and invisible to then becoming important and eye-catching. So you can vary in your affect based upon what's relevant and important to you at any given time. So it's what you believe to be worth your attention. This podcast is largely focused on improving personal affect and helping you to believe in your own unlimited potential. And that is because affect is going to impact our goal orientation. Goal orientation is not the goals that we're consciously setting, like learn to ride a bike. Goal orientation is the why behind it. Do you want to learn the skill and be able to ride a bike? Or do you want to gain the approval of your parents for learning to ride a bike? Lots of factors play into our affect and goal orientation. They can be socioeconomic, race, gender, culture, all the different aspects of our identities that shape our experiences. But we're going to be the most successful in our endeavors when we position ourselves to be learning goal-oriented. So our behaviors are motivated by a desire to learn, not simply to achieve. And then we have a positive affect to support that, and we believe in our ability to learn. In taking a personal inventory, we want to be aware of our affect and goal orientation as it relates to what it is that we're doing, because those will be the foundational elements to the work of the nervous system in processing the information we receive. So kind of bringing it all together, when we set out to learn something for the sake of learning it, we want to know, we want to understand, we want to be able to do something. And then we believe that we can. We have now primed ourselves. We told the doorman, this is what I want you to let in. And our sensory doors, whatever varying degree they're open, that's going to then filter through and is going to support that goal through the connections that exist. So rather than like boxing ourselves in with labels like a visual learner, we can understand that learning isn't an isolated process. And generally, taking a multisensory approach is going to allow us to fire more neural synapses and wire those connections more strongly, because we're layering the information and we're giving more opportunities to the RAS to say, hey, check this out. Hey, look at this. And we're making connections through these different and varied kinds of information that come in. The visual information layered with the auditory information, layered with that like kinesthetic proprioception. Those pieces then create those connections and form those pathways. And it's going to be stronger when you're like piecing them together rather than only having one because you think that that one is weighted more heavily. And so when we think about the map of our nervous system, we've got our own unique map, and we aren't going to try to rebuild it. We're not like, oh, but look at their map. Their map's really laid out well. I'm going to reconstruct mine. That's not how it works. If a city is going to improve its transportation lines, they don't just go build a new city. They add some bike lanes. They repave some of the main highways. They incorporate some pedestrian walkways, and they improve the existing infrastructure, and they build out from the existing infrastructure. And that's what we want to do. And that's why understanding the different components of our own unique learner variability, we can then build on that and improve out from that. So I hope that helps. I hope that there was something in there that connected with your neural pathways. And I am excited to put out some more episodes. Feel free to make suggestions. And I hope you have an absolutely fabulous day.